One of these movies had its best footage destroyed by the studio. It's gone forever. No one will ever see it. Another one was so far ahead of its time it took 20 years for people to realize it was a masterpiece. The 90s didn't just make great movies that flopped. Hollywood actively sabotaged them. By 1993, Arnold Schwarzenegger could do comedy. Twins made $100 million. Kindergarten Cop made another $100. People got used to Arnold making fun of himself. So Columbia Pictures put together this action comedy that was going to take that idea and crank it up. They got John McTiernan to direct, the guy who made Die Hard and Predator. They brought in Shane Black to co-write the script. This is the Lethal Weapon guy, one of the sharpest action writers in Hollywood. On paper, this thing should have been a slam dunk. The movie was about a kid who gets pulled into an Arnold action movie and has to survive in a world where all the action movie cliches are real. It had Arnold playing a character named Jack Slater, who's basically a parody of every Arnold character. But people didn't get that level of meta. The movie made just $137 million against its $85 million budget. Here's the thing, though. Watch Last Action Hero now, and it feels like it was made yesterday. Rick and Morty built an entire show around this kind of stuff and became massive. Last Action Hero was doing multiverse adventures before the MCU existed. McTiernan and Black made something too smart for 1993, and it took 20 years for people to catch up. Same year, Robert Townsend, the guy who made Hollywood Shuffle, decided he was going to make an original superhero movie. Not based on a comic, not based on anything, just a completely new character. And he stacked the cast. Townsend himself played the lead, a teacher named Jeff Reed. The villains were played by Cypress Hill and Naughty by Nature. Frank Gorshin from the Batman TV show showed up as a crime boss. This was a who's who of black talent in the early 90s. The premise was simple. Jeff gets hit by a meteor, gains superpowers, uses them to fight the gangs and drug dealers terrorizing his neighborhood. It made just $8 million at the box office. In a year when Jurassic Park made over $900 million worldwide, nobody wanted to see an original black superhero movie. Think about that timing. This came out in 1993. Black Panther made $1.3 billion 25 years later. Imagine if the Meteor Man had come out in 2018, or even in 2025 like Sinners. But it was too early, and it was original, and it flopped at the box office. In 1992, a movie came out with Jeffrey Jones and Terry Garr, two middle-aged suburbanites getting beamed to an alien planet. The director was Greg Beeman, whose biggest credit was License to Drive with Richard Grieco. This was not a prestige project. But here's what people didn't know. The script was written by Chris Matheson based on a story by Ed Solomon, the guys who wrote Bill and Ted's Excellent Adventure, and just like Bill and Ted, this movie had that same mix of sci-fi goofiness and genuine heart. Garr and Jones play a couple who get transported to planet Spingo, which is populated entirely by idiots and ruled by a maniac played by John Lovitz. The movie had fantastic puppet work, great practical effects, all this stuff that looks incredible now when everything's CGI. But it was 1992, blockbusters were getting bigger and sexier, and nobody wanted to see a low-budget comedy about middle-aged people fighting John Lovitz on a planet of morons. So of course it flopped hard. The Coen brothers made a screwball comedy about inventing the hula hoop. That premise alone probably explains why it flopped. Joel and Ethan Coen had already made Blood Simple, Raising Arizona, and Miller's Crossing. They had a reputation for making dark, weird, challenging movies. Then they teamed up with Sam Raimi to write a comedy set in the 1950s about a guy from Indiana who comes to New York and accidentally invents the hula hoop. Tim Robbins played the naive inventor. Paul Newman played the ruthless businessman trying to destroy him. The jokes were sharp, the story actually had real emotion to it, and it made less than half its budget back. People didn't care about a screwball pastiche in 1994. 2 years later, the Coens made Fargo, which made fun of Midwesterners and became a huge hit. But Hudsucker, which was just as good and just as carefully made, got ignored. Kathryn Bigelow had just made Point Break, which was a hit. James Cameron co-wrote the script for her next movie. On paper, this should have worked. The movie was called Strange Days, and it was this cyberpunk thing set on New Year's Eve 1999. Ralph Fiennes played a greasy ex-cop named Lenny Nero who dealt in squids, basically mini-discs that let you experience what someone else recorded, feel what they felt, see what they saw. When Lenny finds a recording showing a brutal attack on his ex-girlfriend, he and his partner end up running from a whole bunch of 90s bad guys. Strange Days made $8 million on a $42 million budget. That's already bad, but here's what made it worse. It got a limited home video release. This was the 90s, when DVDs were about to become huge and movies that bombed in theaters could find whole new audiences at Blockbuster. Strange Days didn't get that second chance. The studio basically buried it. Michael Keaton was still riding high from the Batman movies and his 80s comedies. Harold Ramis had just directed Groundhog Day a few years earlier. The script was based on a well-received National Lampoon story. Everything pointed to this being a family-friendly hit. The premise was simple. A guy clones himself to deal with all the demands of daily life. It's something most people can relate to, and it gave Keaton a chance to play multiple versions of the same character, which he's great at. Multiplicity opened to mixed reviews and made less than half of its $45 million budget back. People just dismissed it. After Batman made a fortune in 1989, Hollywood learned all the wrong lessons. Instead of making more movies about DC and Marvel characters, studios rushed into production on 1930s pulp heroes. Dick Tracy, the Shadow, all these old-timey characters. The Phantom might be the most unlikely of all of them. Billy Zane, never a box office draw, playing an old superhero in a purple outfit. Of course it bombed at the box office. But here's why the Phantom works better now. Back in the 90s, people were either all in on superhero movies or completely tired of them from this wave of pulp adaptations. Now we've had decades of slick Marvel movies that all kind of look the same, and The Phantom feels refreshing because it fully embraces its pulp fiction roots. Director Simon Wincer didn't try to modernize it or make it ironic. He just made a straightforward action movie about a guy in a purple suit. It's just a satisfying, no-frills adventure, and it was the right movie at the wrong time. Bill Duke is a legend. He was in Commando and Predator in the 80s, but his work behind the camera is just as impressive. Hoodlum is one of his best. The movie told the real story of a gang war in Harlem between the Black Mafia and the combined Jewish and Italian mobs. There's some serious talent here like Lawrence Fishburne, Tim Roth, and Andy Garcia. Duke directed it with real care, but it didn't make back its $30 million budget. United Artists marketed Hoodlum as a brutal action flick. Gunshots, explosions, the whole thing. That's what the trailers promised. But Bill Duke wasn't interested in making that movie. He wanted to explore character, to dig into the psychology of Fishburne's character. The movie was more dramatic than violent. So people showed up expecting one thing and got something else. The marketing killed it. If you watch Hoodlum now, knowing it's more character study than action movie, it's excellent. Fishburne and Roth both give incredible performances. But people in 1997 didn't know that's what they were getting, and by the time word got out, it was too late. Stephen Sommers is kind of an inconsistent director. He made The Mummy in 1999, which was great. But then the sequels got worse, the Mummy spin-offs didn't work, and G.I. Joe was just fun trash. But the year before The Mummy, Sommers made Deep Rising, and almost nobody saw it. It's got Treat Williams as part of a sea expedition that runs into an underwater monster. What makes it work is that Summers kept the CGI limited. He focused on practical gore and implied menace instead of showing everything. The creature stays mysterious, the tension stays high, and the whole thing has way more personality than most polished genre films from that era. It's not as good as The Mummy, of course, but it's got that same mix of action and horror, that same energy. It just came out a year too early and got buried. Made just $11 million against its $45 million budget. Late 90s, everyone was a little paranoid about the millennium, so devil movies were having a moment. The Devil's Advocate made money, End of Days with Schwarzenegger made money. But Fallen, directed by Gregory Hoblit, completely tanked at the box office. Denzel Washington plays a cop tracking a serial-killing demon. The twist is that the demon spreads through touch. It jumps from person to person just by touching them, which probably sounded silly to studio executives and might explain why audiences didn't show up. But Hoblit uses that concept to build incredibly tense sequences. The demon could be anyone. Every crowd scene becomes dangerous. Every handshake is a threat. The movie even has a satisfying, twisty ending. But it didn't even make back half its budget.